Well, welcome to Cambridge. It's mid-February and the first orchid that I wanted to show you is one of my real favourites for this time of the year. It fills the greenhouse with scent from around the end of January right the way through February and into March. And it's this orchid. It's one of the so-called chain orchids. This is Dendrochilum glumaceum. I've had it for quite a long time. It comes from the Philippines and Borneo from about 2,000 up to 2,300 metres down to about 500 metres, so it covers quite a big range. And up there the mountain forest is sort of cool and moist and quite mossy. This was one of the first orchids that I bought for its notable scent. And as soon as I got it, which was a small plant in those days, just a sort of small division from a nursery, as soon as the flowers started opening, I could smell this wonderful spicy scent, and I thought that is marvellous. Anyway, over the next few years, I collected two more forms of it. This one is the first one that comes into flower. It has very white flowers, and if you notice right at the bottom, it has these quite pretty sort of pinkish green sheaths where they come up first. The flowers come out of the centre of the new growths each year. And they first begin to open successively, and this one has just about, and that's why I wanted to film it today, this one has just about reached its peak where all the flowers are beautifully open. You notice it's in the hanging basket because it needs a hanging basket to display itself quite well. The other one that I have is this one, and if you look on the internet, you'll see that there seem to be two distinct forms of Dendrochilum glumaceum. The one that I first showed you is the most common, and then there's this one which flowers, I would say the timing is about a month later. You can see this one's only just beginning to come out. And this one has, one of the features of this is it has these really distinct, beautiful pink sort of sheaths where the growths come out, much more pronounced than in the other form. This will be out now right way into the next 3 or 4 weeks. So between the two different forms, it covers about 2 months and fills the greenhouse with a scent all that time. As far as I can tell, this one isn't quite so strongly scented as the other one. So the first one that I showed you is the best one for scent, and in fact it's the most common. They quite quickly become really quite big plants, and this one was a much bigger plant about a year ago, and I actually divided it because it had got too big. And I chopped it, well, teased it first of all into half, so I had 2 halves, and then 1 half I divided again, so I ended up with 3 plants. So I've got 2 quite big ones, and then two smaller ones. This one is probably the best one to display the distinctly different habit with this form. You see the flowers tend to, whereas this one the flowers arch out, this one the flowers tend to be on a much longer, thinner, more pendant stalk, and then the flowers sort of come down and then gracefully turn back up a little bit at the end. Now this is a third slightly different form that I've got, and unlike the other one, this one has green sheaths to the new growths as opposed to the pink ones on the other form. Now this is rather a miserable specimen, and I wanted to show you this one because when I first had the plants, starting from a small plant, all I needed to do when it got a bit bigger every year or two was to put it in a slightly bigger and bigger pot. So it didn't really matter when I did it, and I think I did it sort of after flowering, so that the new roots could go into the new compost. The mistake I made, and this is going back 2 or 3 years, when the plant became really large in quite a big pot and I just had to divide it, was I obviously did it at the wrong time of the year. I'm pretty sure I did it after flowering. I thought, oh gosh, the plant's too big and I'm going to have to divide this and make some smaller ones. That was a big mistake. And since I did that, I've learnt that you must only divide them at the end of the growing season, which is around November, December, the end of the year, because the growing cycle starts early in late winter, and then the new growths come, they flower, the root growths developed, and the new pseudo-bulbs developed over the summer. And what happened was, having divided it into several little bits, they just went back and back. I couldn't understand what I'd done wrong. In the end, I managed to salvage, because I had half a dozen small plants. In the end, I managed to salvage the 2 or 3 best ones, put them into this pan, and now, having suffered really quite badly for a couple of years, they really hated me for it. This is just beginning to get going. You can see that the new growths are now back to the size that they should be. It's flowering again as it should be. So in another probably 2 more growing seasons, this will be quite a big plant again. So remember, when it comes to certainly this Dendrochilum, probably all Dendrochilums, only divide them when they're completely dormant, right at the end of the growing cycle. Don't wait until they started to grow and new roots have started to develop. That might be a good time to divide many orchids, but it certainly doesn't work with Dendrochilums. And the other useful thing I wanted to say is that this greenhouse is generally quite cool, shady, and quite high humidity. So I've got a hygrometer up there and it's showing 80% at the moment. And in here it never drops below 70. So that way I can recreate the sort of cool mountain, sort of mossy cloud forest conditions that the Dendrochilums would have come from. And that's probably the reason that I find them quite easy to grow. In a house, for example, it would be difficult because you wouldn't be able to maintain the humidity and it would probably be too warm. And the very interesting thing is that after I'd been growing them for quite a long time and I had a spare plant, I hung it up under here. And there is an area where condensation develops just underneath this overhang in the greenhouse. And you actually get drips coming down here. Now, for most orchids, that would be fatal. But I found that even with, in fact, there's a drip there, you see there, and that will be dripping down into here and keeping the compost quite saturated most of the time. And much to my surprise, especially early on when I wasn't so experienced at growing orchids, they really loved it. So now I grow all my Dendrochilums under here and to keep them cool and moist and basically quite wet quite a lot of the time. Right, well, I've hooked this one down again, and I've got several other orchids that I'd like to show you. So this has been a fairly long video, so I think I'll wait until tomorrow and do a bit more filming and show you those tomorrow. So for the time being, surrounded by the lovely, sweet, spicy scent of this wonderful Dendrochilum glumaceum. Thanks very much for watching and hope to see you in the next one.